the composite, 48.8 services, 47.8 manufacturing, sits with the Q3 GDP contraction in France. But how much worse can it get?
Well, the OECD spoke a week ago and was quite critical of France, and the lack of structural reforms have been enacted by the Hollande Government. So it is disappointing. We've seen some flatlining in the services side and also less so the manufacturing over the last 3 months. But it does look worrying also the fact that both those series for the past 14 months have been below that of Germany. So it's suggesting sort of bigger structural issues for France and headwinds ahead. So it's, it potentially could be worse, and we could see another sort of downturn in GDP in the fourth quarter, which wouldn't be a great backdrop.
And what does this do for the euro?
For the euro, it's maybe sort of adds to the sort of slightly negative tone that's come through in the last 24 hours. But overall, I'm still relatively positive overall for the euro going into year end.
All right, let's throw the ECB in there as well. Of course, calls, and you mentioned the OECD, calls for them to start QE. What's your take on that?
It's not the easiest thing to do on a sort of strict basis. All the bond buying they've done to date has been sterilised. So those done in the earlier bond buying programme, they sold or bought back securities back from the market to actually sterilise those. So in theory, they can't do QE in the traditional sense. It's a sense of how they manage to do that, and it gets very politically difficult, but also legally, and the prospect for legal challenges are quite strong, I think. So it's a question of how they manage to do it, because in theory they're not allowed to do QE in the same way that both those other central banks around the world have managed to achieve.
And we heard something on the deposit rates yesterday that knocked the euro, but as you say, you're still positive euro, right?
Yeah, the deposit rate was a bit of a non-thing. There's some sources story on one of the wires suggesting that they could put the deposit rate down to negative 0.1 on a further refi rate cut. The refi rate's already at 0.25, so it's not that surprising that they would want to do that. So overall, I think we did see that knock lower, but I think overall the backdrop for the euro is still okay. It's low inflation, low interest rates, and slow growth. The combination of factors we're seeing on the euro have actually been generally positive, especially because it's running a current account surplus around 2% of GDP, and those factors have generally been not that negative for currencies, especially when you're in a general zero to very low rate environment.